There is a town in the state of Nevada that most Americans have never heard of. It sits at the bottom of a canyon, 10 miles from the Idaho line, and about 20 miles out, the radio quits and the phone gives up, one bar at a time, until the screen says no service and stops pretending. You cannot fly in. There is no railroad, and there never was one. Two of the three roads that reach this canyon close under the snow every winter, and they can stay closed for as long as 8 months. So for most of the year, there is exactly one way in, and it is a dirt grade cut into a canyon wall, 1,000 feet down, in low gear with the drop on one side and rock on the other. Everything these people eat, burn, or build with comes down that road. Their groceries are 90 miles away in another state. Their telephone service arrived in 1984, not 1904, and the thermometer down there has read 38 below. And the mail comes the same way it has come since before the First World War. 65 miles of dirt out of Rogerson, Idaho, with one driver on the seat, all the way down into the canyon. On the evening of December 5th, 1916, that wagon came down the grade carrying $4,000 in payroll cash for the miners. The driver had been dead for 5 miles. This is Jarbidge, Nevada, Elko County, elevation 6,339 feet. Year-round population somewhere between 12 and 16 people. The state of Nevada's own tourism office calls it the most isolated town in the lower 48. The money that came off that wagon has never been found. Not when they searched the canyon with lanterns. Not when the state offered the man who took it his freedom in exchange for the location. Not in the 110 years since. And there are people down there with metal detectors this summer still looking. What the driver left behind instead was a mark on a piece of canvas that changed how American courtrooms convict people to this day. His name was Fred Searcy. Almost nobody outside Elko County knows it. And when they finally filed his death certificate, it ended with a sentence I have never seen on an official form before or since. Before this is over, you will know what that sentence said, why the Shoshone would not set foot in this canyon for 1,000 years, and how the business district of the richest gold district in the state of Nevada burned to the ground in one afternoon for a reason that had nothing to do with bad luck. Start with the town as it sits right now, because the way people live down here explains everything that came before it. There is a school for the handful of children in town, and it goes through 8th grade. After that, school means leaving, and every family here has had to have that conversation. The Red Dog Saloon went up during the rush in 1910, and it is still open, still heated in winter by a wood stove that somebody has to feed. Walk in on a January night, and a stranger will put another log on for you before you've got your coat off. Ask what people drink around here, and they will pour you the town's own invention, a thing they call the Jarbidge cooler, and nobody outside this canyon has ever heard of it. The Outdoor Inn does rooms and meals through the season, and the Trading Post covers the basics. One family has kept both bars, the motel, and the RV park going since 2018, opening and closing them by season, so the town never entirely shuts. Ask anybody who has driven in how they were treated, and you get a version of the same story. Somebody they had never met walked them around, told them where to camp, and what the road does when the weather turns, then drove out that evening to make sure they had settled in all right. In a canyon where the nearest hospital is 3 hours away, checking on people is the infrastructure. The community hall from 1910 is still standing and still doing its job, which is that the meetings, the weddings, and the funerals all happen under the same roof. And the quiet is the part that gets people. No traffic, no plane routes, overhead, just water in the canyon and wind in the trees. And at night, a sky most Americans have never actually seen. Every one of those people chose this, and most of them chose it more than once, because every winter is another vote. Now go back 1,000 years, because the Shoshone had a word for this canyon, and it was not a friendly one. The word was Sawhobbits, roughly 2 Sawhobbits. Sawhobbits was a giant, and in the tradition, he was not a story told to make children behave. He lived somewhere in these walls. He hunted men traveling the canyon alone. He carried them off in a big woven basket, and he ate them. So the Shoshone stayed out. the same way you or I would stay off a low river crossing we knew flooded. Not fear in general. One particular danger in one particular place that they could name. Hold on to that word. It comes back at the end, and it comes back harder than you expect. In the mid-1880s, a ranch hand found a little color here, and his story pulled 2 more men into the canyon. What those 2 came across, in the one account that survives, was a working site with a skeleton lying beside it. Both of them fell seriously ill afterward. One died, the other walked out, and could never be talked into going back for the rest of his life. That story got a name, the Lost Sheepherder Mine, and for 20 years, it was about all most Nevadans knew about this place. And then, in the spring of 1909, a prospector named Dave Bourne hit pay dirt down on the canyon floor and staked a group of claims he called the North Star. By the end of that year, better than 75 claims out of this canyon were on record at the county seat in Elko. Dave Bourne did not keep quiet about any of it. The reports grew in the telling. First, it was $250,000 in gold in sight. By March of 1910, newspapers across the country were printing that the Bourne mine held more than $27 million, and that it would be easy to take out. Remember that number. Later on, I'm going to tell you what this canyon actually produced, and the gap between those 2 figures is the entire story. Think about who was reading it. This was 50 years after the Comstock, and 60 after California. The frontier had been declared closed for 2 decades. There were automobiles in the streets and electric light in the kitchen, and every geologist worth his pay had said on the record that the great strikes were behind us. And here was a stranger in a canyon nobody could find on a map, saying the gold was lying out in the open. They came in the middle of winter. By the end of March 1910, there were 1,500 men down here, 500 tents strung 3 miles along the river, and better than 500 claims filed by mid-April. Men in that camp were talking out loud about a population of 10,000 and about breaking away from Elko County to start a county of their own. None of it happened, and this is the first thing nearly every account of this town gets wrong. You will read that the population climbed past 2,000 and held there. It never did. Within weeks, those men worked out that the newspaper accounts had been wildly exaggerated, and most of them were gone before the next winter. By summer, the camp was down to a few hundred, and then the canyon did something that reads like a joke the mountain told at their expense. The snow melted and new ore came to light. Good ore in real quantity. The wild exaggeration turned out to be half true after all, so in the spring of 1911, the whole rush repeated itself, 1,200 men this time, walking back up the same road they had walked down. That wave broke too, and the town settled into what it would be for the rest of its working life, a camp of a couple hundred people. Here is what ties 1910 to the town I showed you at the start. There was no railroad. The nearest track was 65 miles off, across the state line at Rogerson, Idaho, so every beam, every barrel, every sack of flour, and every piece of mill machinery came in behind horses and mules over a dirt track, at freight rates that ate a man alive. That has never changed. Everything in this canyon still comes down that same road today, and the freight rides along and the price of it, which is why a small house in a town with no supermarket and no paved street will list at around $380,000. The house is not what cost that. The road is. Back then, one fellow sat down, did the arithmetic, and worked out that it was cheaper to mail coal than to freight it. He shipped 2 tons of coal into this canyon by parcel post, package by package, until somebody at the United States Post Office noticed what he was doing and put a stop to it. There was no electricity either, which meant no mills, which meant most of the good ore stayed in the ground. Keep that in mind. When the electricity finally shows up in this story, it burns the town down. And there was one more problem, an odd one. Nobody in Jarbidge legally owned the ground their building sat on. The whole canyon had been folded into the Humboldt National Forest in 1908, the year before the strike, so the town was squatting on federal land. Fixing it took a proclamation from the President of the United States. In 1911, 10.5 acres were cut back out of the National Forest and handed over so that a couple hundred people at the bottom of a canyon could hold title to their own lots. That same year, they built the jail, a single stone cell with a cot and a chamber pot, put up to hold rowdy miners until a deputy could ride in from Elko. It is still standing. It was still in use as late as about 1945. And the story the town tells is that one miner, a big one, figured out he could lift the roof, clean off the bunk, slip down to the saloon for the evening, and climb back into his own cell before morning. That cell holds the most famous prisoner in northern Nevada in about 6 years. In 1916, the bachelors of Jarbidge did something that tells you exactly how far from the world this place was. They wrote letters to the newspapers, published letters appealing for help with a serious problem, which was that there were no women here at all. A woman in Reno read one, came out, and married a local miner named Robert Knight. So that was the town. A couple hundred souls, no railroad, no power, coal arriving in the mail, a jail with a roof you could lift, and men advertising in the papers for wives. All of it was about to change, and the decision that changed it got made 2,000 miles from this canyon by people who never once set foot in it. In 1913, the El Coro Mining Company moved in and started leasing and buying claims in every direction. El Coro was not a partnership of prospectors with dirt under their nails. It was part of the Guggenheim's Yukon Gold Company, the same Guggenheim fortune that ran through Colorado smelters and Alaskan copper and Chilean nitrate, and ended up, in the fullness of time, putting a museum on Fifth Avenue in New York. They built a mill, they put in a water system, and by 1918 they had gathered the best claims in the canyon into one operation and were taking gold out at industrial scale. It worked right away. In 1918 and 1919, the Jarbidge district was the leading gold producer in the entire state of Nevada, which means it had just outproduced Goldfield, 300 miles south, the biggest boomtown in Nevada history, 20,000 people, and a United States senator and federal troops in the streets, beaten by a canyon with a couple hundred people in it and a cannibal giant in its name. Here's the part the boom stories skip. The same consolidation that put Jarbidge on top of the state is what finished the independent miner here. Before El Coro, a man with a claim and a strong back was holding a lottery ticket. After El Coro, he was holding a job. The local historian who spent his life on this district said it plainly enough. Of all the money that came out of this canyon, almost none of it reached the men underground. And what did reach them was wages. 90,000 feet of tunnel went into these walls. For the company, that was a return on investment. For the man with the shovel, it came to about 17 miles of disappointment. And that payroll had to get here somehow. Company money coming down a dirt road out of Idaho in the back of an open wagon with one unarmed man on the seat. Picture winter here in 1916. No automobiles yet, only horses and wagons, and drifts of 20 and 30 feet that could shut the road for weeks. The mail wagon coming down from Rogerson was not simply the mail. It was the payroll, the medicine, the newspapers, and the only physical thread tying this town to the rest of the country. Fred Searcy had been driving that route about a month. While we're here, let me correct the second thing everybody gets wrong. Every headline you will ever read calls this the last stagecoach robbery in America. There was no stagecoach in it anywhere. Searcy drove a plain 2-horse buckboard with the mail piled in the back. The last robbery of the Old West did not even raid a coach. He left Rogerson on the morning of December 5th with about $4,000 in payroll, close to $100,000 in today's money, and 65 miles of snow in front of him. Around 6:30 that evening, half a mile north of town, a woman named Rose Dexter heard the wagon coming through the storm and stepped out to say good evening to the driver. The driver did not answer her. The wagon went on past, down the canyon toward the lights of town, and never arrived. Up at the post office, the postmaster, Scott Fleming, put the delay down to weather for a while, the way anybody would in 4 feet of new snow. Then he stopped putting it down to weather and got a search party together with lanterns. Around 11 that night, they found the wagon pulled off the road behind a stand of willows less than a quarter mile from the main street, with Searcy sitting upright on the seat and half covered over in snow. Their first thought was that the cold had taken him. Then somebody leaned in and saw the powder burns in his hair. He had been shot in the back of the head at arm's length 5 miles up the road, which means whoever did it climbed onto that wagon, propped the body upright on the seat, took the reins, and drove 5 miles through a blizzard, sitting next to a dead man, right past Rose Dexter, who wished a corpse and his killer a good evening and could not tell them apart. One mail pouch was still sealed. The other one, with the payroll in it, was gone. They turned it up days later, buried in the snow, and only because a stray dog wandered up to the search party, put its nose down, and started digging. The bottom of the pouch had been cut open and the money was gone. But there on the canvas, printed in Fred Searcy's blood, was the palm of a human hand. Suspicion landed fast on a drifter named Ben Cool, 32, out of Michigan, a baker by trade with a record for petty theft in California and horse stealing in Oregon, out on bond in Jarbidge for trespassing on the night of the murder. Under his bed, in a traveling case, they found an ivory-gripped .44 with a strip of bloody canvas tied around the butt. They put him in that stone cell with the liftable roof, and he did not lift it. The trial opened in Elko in September of 1917 and ran 18 days. The state had one real problem. Nobody had watched the killing. The blizzard had watched it, and the blizzard could not be put on the stand. What the state had instead was that handprint. Fingerprints had convicted a murderer in this country exactly once before, in Chicago in 1911. A palm print had never done it anywhere on earth. So the prosecution brought in two of the West's early forensic men who set the bloody print from the mail sack against an inked impression taken of Cool's left palm in the Elko jail, and put both of them up enlarged on a screen where 12 jurors could sit and study them. One of those men told the jury he was as certain as it is humanly possible to be that the same hand made both. The prosecutor was the Elko County District Attorney, a young man named Edward Carville. Remember that name for a few minutes. The jury was out 2 hours and came back with murder in the first degree. Then the judge offered Cool a choice that belongs entirely to a vanishing West: the rope or the firing squad. Cool picked the rifles. He never faced them. About a week before the date, the Pardons Board commuted him to life. His conviction went up to the Nevada Supreme Court, which in 1918 upheld the palm print as evidence, the first ruling of its kind in the United States. State versus Cool is still cited today, and every single time a palm print closes a case anywhere in this country, the trail runs back through this canyon. The two men arrested with him came out of it differently. Billy McGraw turned state's witness and walked free, and Ed Beck, a Finnish immigrant the camp called Cut-Lip Swede, was convicted and paroled in 1923. Cool served close to 3 decades, and for a while he was the longest-serving resident of the Nevada State Prison, where he kept chickens in the yard. He was paroled in the middle 1940s and was dead inside of a year. The man who signed that parole as governor of Nevada was Edward Carville, the same district attorney who put him in there. More than once, the state offered Cool a shorter sentence if he would simply say where the $4,000 went. He never told them. As for Fred Searcy, they filed his death certificate almost 3 months late. It lists him as a white, single male, occupation stage driver, dead of a gunshot wound through the head, inflicted with murderous intent. Where the form asks his age, there is a question mark. His birthplace, a question mark. His parents' names, question marks. And in the space where the man signing it is supposed to affirm the information is true, somebody typed one sentence: no one knew anything about him. That is the man whose murder rewrote American evidence law. Now the fall, and it did not begin with the gold running out. In 1919, El Coro finally brought electric power into the canyon to run its mill, and then refused to let the town hook onto the line. So Jarbidge went on burning open gas lamps the way it had since 1909. That summer, a barrel of homemade whiskey blew up in the basement of the Success Bar, and the gas lamps did the rest. The fire went up through the building, got into the tar paper on the roofs, and the wind lifted burning sheets of it clean across the street into everything on the other side. There was no hydrant system in a wooden town at the bottom of a canyon because there was no money for one in a town that only ever earned wages. 22 businesses burned that afternoon, along with a row of log cabins. They lost the Success Bar and the Mint Bar, the telephone office, the movie house, the dance hall, the Dozier restaurant, an eating house somebody had built out of bottles, and the barbershop belonging to Mrs. McCulloch, the one the men called Gertie Gertie, whose chair they used to line up for. The business district of the leading gold-producing district in the state of Nevada burned to the ground in an afternoon because the company that had the electricity would not share it. The town said so out loud and kept on saying it, and after the ashes cooled, El Coro gave in and let the people connect to the line. Most of those buildings never came back. Through the 1920s, the gold thinned out. El Coro shut its Jarbidge operations down in the early 1930s. A few small outfits limped along behind them, and by around 1941, large-scale mining here was finished. Now, that number I asked you to hold, the papers in March of 1910 promised $27 million sitting out in the open in a single mine. The final tally for this entire canyon, every company, every claim, every mile of tunnel over more than 20 years, came to about $10 million, roughly a third of what a newspaper printed to get 1,500 men to walk into the snow. And there is one more correction to make, because this one is cast in bronze at the edge of town. Nevada State Historical Marker number 69 says the Jarbidge mines produced $59 million in gold. They did not. The Geological Survey figure works out to around $10 million at the prices of the day, which is exactly what the town's own sign says, standing 100 yards away. An older transcription of that same state marker reads $9 million. Somewhere in a repainting or a retyping, a 9 turned into a 59, and it has been standing there handing people the wrong number ever since. So the mill stops, the company packs up, and the money leaves, the way it always does. What happens next is what separates this canyon from the several hundred other Nevada camps that simply blew away. Some people stayed. And in 1995, one more decision, made a long way from here, nearly took the road out from under them. That year, the Jarbidge River came up in flood and tore out 2.5 miles of dirt track called South Canyon Road, the one running up to a trailhead, a campground, and the wilderness above town. The Forest Service did not rebuild it. This river holds the southernmost surviving population of bull trout in North America, and in 1998, that fish was listed as threatened, and federal agencies argued that putting the road back would wash enough sediment into the water to finish the trout off. Elko County argued the road had been there before the National Forest was, that the county owned it, and that it was needed for firefighting and for access. In 1998, the county sent a bulldozer up there, and that went nowhere. The Forest Service dropped 3 boulders across the entrance, and on the 4th of July, 2000, several hundred people came to Jarbidge carrying shovels. They came from Idaho and Nevada, from Georgia and Rhode Island and Maine and Florida and New York and Vermont. A sawmill owner in Montana had started mailing shovels to the town, and thousands of people paid $1 apiece to get their names welded onto a 28-foot shovel that stood on the courthouse lawn in Elko. Folks put their whole families on it. A few put their dogs. That afternoon, they ran 3 ropes around the biggest boulder, the one they had named Liberty Rock, and several hundred people pulled it out of the road by hand, a few inches at a time, chanting while they pulled. And when the road was open, they did not drive a truck up it themselves. They went and got Helen Wilson. Helen Wilson was 90 years old and the oldest resident of Jarbidge. She had watched the mines close. She had watched the young people leave for school and not come back. She had watched this canyon empty out over the better part of a century while she stayed. They put her in a pickup and drove her over those 900 feet of road first, ahead of everybody, and several hundred strangers from 11 states stood in the dirt and cheered a 90-year-old woman riding down a road they had opened with their hands. The case went into mediation and then sat in the courts another 20 years, settled about 21 years after the flood, with the road belonging to the county and the federal agencies keeping a say in how it gets rebuilt. Liberty Rock is still out there, off to the side now, with a small plaque on it that reads, "Freedom isn't free." The big shovel stands by Pioneer Park, and the names have weathered off of it. And this is where I have to correct the internet one last time, because there is a version of this town going around online that the people who live here have publicly called nonsense. You will be told Jarbidge is sealed off from the world every winter, no way in, nobody coming, nothing to be done if something goes wrong. Part of that is true. The 2 dirt routes up from the Elko side do close, and they can stay closed as long as 8 months. But the road down from Idaho stays open year-round, and the mail comes in several days a week. This town has a volunteer fire department, paid for in large part by a rifle raffle and an auction held every Halloween weekend at the Outdoor Inn, with a free pig feed thrown in. Those same volunteers take the emergency medical calls, working alongside the department up in Jackpot, and the life flight crews who fly into this canyon when somebody has to be in a hospital in a hurry. The isolation here is real, and it is severe. The helplessness is something people imagine about isolated places from a long way off. Ask them why they stay, and you will not get an answer about convenience, because there isn't any convenience to point at. What you get is closer to arithmetic. In a town of 14 people, everybody knows whose truck is whose and roughly what time it usually moves. So when a truck doesn't move at the usual time, somebody walks over and knocks. Above them is the Jarbidge Wilderness, the first wilderness area Nevada ever got, protected since 1964, and by most accounts among the least visited in the lower 48, with 8 peaks over 10,000 feet. For the people down in the canyon, that country is not something they put up with alongside the isolation. It is the reason they are here. Every time a video like this one goes up, somebody in Jarbidge says a version of the same sentence, which is that they are glad you liked it and they would rather you didn't all come at once. If you do go, and you can, the Idaho Road is open. Walk in the way you would walk into somebody's home, because that is what this canyon is. And now the name which I told you would come back. The settlers who came for the gold heard Sahabits from their Shoshone guides and could not get their mouths around it. What came out was Jarbidge, and a cafe in the camp actually opened under that spelling, the Jarbidge Grill, around 1910. The word kept sliding and shortening the way words do in a town where nobody agrees how to spell anything, until somebody nailed up a wooden sign that read Jarbidge, and that settled it. The old word meant a danger belonging to this canyon in particular, something that took the man who came in alone and gave nothing back. 1,500 men walked in on a number 3 times too big and walked out with wages. 22 businesses burned because of a decision made in an office 2,000 miles away. $10 million came out of these walls, and almost none of it stayed. And a driver nobody could identify came down that road alone on a winter evening and never made the last quarter mile. $4,000 went into the dark of this canyon with him and has never come back out. Not for the searchers with lanterns, not for the state when it offered a killer his freedom for the answer. Not in 110 years of people walking these hills with shovels and detectors. The gold ran out, the name did not, and 12 to 16 people are down there tonight with the stove going, in a canyon that has been telling everybody exactly what it was since long before any of us got here. If your family came out of this canyon, and a surprising number of families did, the ranchers, the miners, the Forest Service families, the children born here in winters when the doctor could not get in, tell us about them in the comments. The people who know these towns always know more than the record does, and we read every one. And if you have a town of your own, you would put up against this canyon for sheer distance from everything, name it. Somebody reading these comments is from there.